So this video is me describing what omniscience is. It's a very important element of my timeline and the whole, my whole life philosophy and my timeline and stuff, and my whole website is. I think that human beings can achieve omniscience. We have to qualify, there's different levels of omniscience, but I think that's a good way to describe it. So technically what omniscience is having, you could say, a sufficient level of knowledge of history. And from the whole of your knowledge being greater than the sum of its parts. And so that's why, I think omniscience, because that's a whole nother level from regular knowledge, because it's like turbo boost. All of a sudden you're going up like this, come like this, and then you hit the omniscience and it goes, and you get up higher. So for example, if you're trying to know history, you can study all the little bits and pieces of history, but then you're going to realize at one moment that you've learned so much about it that now it's not just the parts. You're not just like a robot mentioning all the different things, but you can take a step back, and because all of the knowledge you have is at the tip of your head, tip of your frontal cortex, that you can plug that knowledge in to everything having to do with that part of history. So then you would know, you could triangulate, you could know things about that period of time that you haven't seen in terms of data, but because of all the other data exists. So it's like all the data, all the little individual data points, from history fused together into one big data point. Kind of like if you know somebody, you grew up with, your parents or your brother, and their personality, how they would act in certain situations, even though you haven't seen them in that situation. Like Jimmy would never take a bribe. Well, how do you know? Have you seen him take a bribe? They're like, no, but he wouldn't. Well, how do you know? Because I've seen enough of things about him to see that he wouldn't take a bribe, that kind of a thing. So you could be like, oh yeah, Britain in the late 1700s, they weren't superstitious about demons and fairies out in the streets. Well, how do you know that? Well, because I know that they were feverish into technology and scientific innovation. They didn't have time for that stuff then. That kind of a thing. And so then you call it omniscience, because it's another level, and it's as much general knowledge that you can expect from a human. So you've gotten to that level, and if everybody has that level, then they could, people could put their heads together to create a whole nother level of omniscience. So, because the technical word for omniscience would be knowing everything, like God. And that's a fun, spiritual exercise to imagine, God being part of everything, and everything's one big living being, and God is omniscient because of that, because you're the eyes of the world through God, blah, blah, blah. But that's God. We're not God. That's a little bit out of the scope of our reality. But there can be a variation of that for humans that we can realistically obtain, which is historical omniscience, or you could call it. And to make it clear what I'm talking about, I'll throw out some maybe other synonyms or ways to describe it, compound words to describe it, sufficient knowledge, sufficient history knowledge. How about consensual historical knowledge? A consensual reality. When a country is healthy, it's when everybody's got the same, are going in the same direction, in lockstep, believing the same thing. Germany was able to do so well in World War II because all the Germans were pissed off about about what the other countries did to them, and so they were all working their asses off, working on the same thing. Maybe that's how Chinese work now. We'll just happily working slave labor, knowing that in the future they'll build it all up and take over the world. You know, like America in the 50s, you know, the people, the MAGA people, make America great again, because in the 50s everybody was white and everybody had money. They don't realize the reason everybody had money was because they taxed the wealthy 90%. But yeah, everybody had money and we're lockstep and believe in the same thing, and that's peace. And the reason people don't know that that was because we taxed the rich 90% is because we today don't have consensual historical knowledge. You know, only like a small fraction of the people know that. And if you mention it to anybody like Patrick Bet-David, well, then you're automatically a socialist, and that's why you're saying it. Oh, and that's another video I wanted to do. Like, if you're gonna, we need to have a foundation, a foundational knowledge, where people, because if you have a good foundation and you have a philosophy about things, then everything in the world after that is going to build off of that. And you're tethered to reality, and you're never going to lose sight of what your essence is and what the world is. There's probably a lot of people in the world who are rich and powerful who don't have a foundation. Donald Trump, one of them. You know, like somebody wanted to become a lawyer because they found out that lawyers make a lot of money. So they go to law school and then they become a lawyer, but they have no foundation in law. Like they never sat down and considered why laws were made from the beginning, and this historical causes for all the different laws and the development of laws and how that makes a healthy society. There's probably a bunch of lawyers out there who don't care about a healthy society, or you know, or doing the law for the right. They just do it. They do law, and they have to do the law right, or else they're going to lose their license or lose their clients. And they just have to, you know, fall lockstep in with all of the rules. Kind of like a thief. The reason that a thief pays for his candy bar in the 7-Eleven is because he knows if he doesn't, he'll get busted. So he does because he has to. You know, and so then if you have a whole bunch of rich and powerful people with no foundation, then they'll be like, you know, they'll act like Bashar al-Assad, where they just spend all their money on sports cars and stuff like that. So anyway, so that's kind of a very related video, but I'll talk about that maybe after this one. But if people, if we all had, you know, that level of omniscience of sufficient historical knowledge, then we would all have a foundation, and we'd all, you know, agree on the most important qualities of a healthy society, you know, and there wouldn't be people out there just saying crazy stuff and leading people astray, like Donald Trump, you know. Donald Trump is the President of the United States for the second time, two-term President of the United States. And he gives speeches talking about how, you know, the English bombed our airports when we were fighting them for independence, and we need to protect our border between Colorado and Mexico so the Mexicans can't get into Colorado across the border from, or, you know, or like, what else did he say? I can't remember. He said a bunch of stuff like that. Basically, and then, of course, him saying, oh, nobody's ever been persecuted as much as I have, or you know, my party hasn't been persecuted as much ever in the history of mankind, or I'm the greatest president in the history of America. That Democratic politician I don't like is the worst politician ever in the history of humankind, and then nobody thinks about it. They're just like, okay, right, yeah, ever from the history, because people don't have a basic knowledge of history. So that's the inoculation of it. But in order to to understand the importance of knowing history, we all need to have a foundation for knowledge, knowing that, the value of knowledge, of history, instead of, and of course all the other things having to do with history, because otherwise we're just gonna just talk in circles around each other and never get to the nobody's ever going to explain anything to anybody, and people aren't going to be able to learn. Like when Sam Cedar gets on Patrick Bet-David and he goes, yeah, the reason that we were doing well in the 50s and 60s is because we taxed the wealthy 90% on every penny over $400,000, which is like $1.5 million today or something. And that, because we were carrying that over from what we were taxing them in World War II, and that's what paid them. And then, Patrick Bet-David, just because he has no foundation, and he knows his viewers don't have any knowledge of history, is just like, oh, so you're a socialist. That's why you're saying that. And then they get to project and say that, people who don't agree with them are like brainwashed into like the socialist cult. When they're just projecting, they're brainwashed into the like the capitalism cult. So you could escape all that with a proper history study, and but for us all to agree on the importance of history and to be motivated to try to learn, we should all think about, the future of human society, and that humans' capability in the future is good enough to be able to be omniscient. Like this whole period of time we're living now is just temporary. We can't stay ignorant like this forever, because we'll eventually get around to figuring out how to learn everything, how to teach everybody everything with the technology. And that's really what we should be focusing on full force now. People are going around talking about how we need to ratchet up, defense spending to attack Iran, or we need to ratchet up kicking people out of the country, or not letting the wokists or the trannies into the army. And when we're too busy talking about that, we're not letting there be any oxygen for us to give towards to actually continue to learn. So we have to get rid of that extraneous stuff before we can actually learn and get to the next level. But you have to be able to, envision it. And we're stuck in this world right now where, like, we can't even vision the future. Like, we don't expect us to survive or something like that. Because you never really talk about people talking about the future unless it's some kind of, like, that game that I never can remember it. Somebody wanted me to do a video about it. I think I might do it today after this video. 4000, the Warcraft 4000 or whatever, where everybody is just fighting each other, and there's emperors throughout the galaxy. It's like Star Wars type of a thing. Like they're they're superimposing like Dark Ages political and religious culture onto future space technology. So you have like the emperors and the slaves and everything, but everybody's traveling around in space. It's because people didn't have a foundation for visualizing the future and humanity progressing, and because they didn't have enough of, they didn't have the big picture. They didn't have the omniscience. They didn't understand, because if you understand all of history, like say all of the different countries in the world, maybe because you're a vampire and you're really old, or you just studied all the time, and you can identify 150 things for a 500-year period for all the different countries, and you can identify what happened in all the different decades and past in the BC and AD, and then every year for the 20th century, you're not going to have nothing to say about the future. You'll have a perfectly clear, crystal clear idea about what the future and what we're going to achieve when, and all the way up to 1,000 years in the future, just based on what you know off the top of your head from the past. And so that's what I call omniscience. Like where you can just, somebody could ask you anything and you would have an answer for it. Like what's the difference between the 1700s and the 1800s? And you'd have like a quick, concise description of it. Like 1700s was the invention of technological stuff. 1800s was the filling out of the world and implementing all that technology throughout the world and transforming the world. And then the 1900s was about, fighting it out. And, you could give like a different time length synopsises of all of it off the top of your head. So, it's kind of hard to describe, but I think that if we all can kind of agree that in the future humanity can learn everything, then we would all try to achieve that, It's kind of like if we can all agree that it's possible to skydive, then we can all skydive. We all have not a problem doing that, and then we all can do it. With the amount of time that we have and that we spend on stuff, we easily could. All we have to do is divert our attention. I saw an ad on Facebook a couple weeks ago. It was a drawing of a kid. I did a screen capture of it. Maybe I can find it on my computer. It was a drawing of a kid, like a tween kid, playing video games, with his like eyes popping out of his head. And there's a caption like, "Does your kid play video games more than 3 hours a day?" Here it is. Check this out. When I saw this, I was like, this has a lot to do with my website. This is an ad I saw on Facebook. "Parents, if your child plays video games more than 3 hours a day, sign your child up now for a video game lawsuit," right? Well, imagine if your child studied my history timeline 3 hours a day. This is basically a video game. Just to try to match those images to what's below it. You can get hooked on this. Like I could play the video game for you right now. Check it out. And I'll show you how it can be a fun little video game to play. So like that's the plague of Tudor England from 1509 to 1510. The plague of Tudor England, 1509 to 1510. The one below it, that's when printed books hit the shelves in England, 1500 to 1509. Right? Printed books hit the market. And you can just rinse and repeat the whole damn thing, right? Here, where do we go? It's kind of hard to do it when you're doing it upside down. Oh shit, where did it go? So anyways, here. What am I doing it like that for? So like you can do it like that or like this. So like that is when Erasmus visited England. Erasmus visits England. And then you just play it. But by the time you're done with it, now you have your omniscience and you understand, and now you're tethered to reality instead of thinking about the future of like, people battling to the death forever and fought in 40,000 years with the, all dressed like Iron Man and, you know, with some like alternative like future that's like something that none of us actually want to be a part of. So that's why I think that it kind of depends on the whole concept tethered to reality with a foundation of the knowledge of that there's this thing called omniscience that humans can achieve for. So anyway, I call it like human omniscience because you have God level omniscience, which we can't hope to. But you even like incorporate it into spirituality. Like every religion could probably understand that concept, like Buddhists with the Enlightenment and Christians with dying and go to heaven and then knowing everything, or like agnostics, like when you die, they say that you can see all of your life decisions and like you could imagine spiritual people when you die, you incarnate, and then your soul becomes more and more intelligent, and because you're an eternal being, well then of course eventually you get so intelligent maybe you can become a god and start your own universe as God and just keep growing on from that. And that's from the different have that philosophy because you have a foundation of knowledge of there's this thing called omniscience, and that you know that your soul lasts forever. And so just tone it down a little bit and make it omniscience for human, like the sufficient level of knowledge of what a human could and should obtain. And it gets easier the more we do it, because then you normalize it. There's lots of stuff that we can do now that's normalized, that's seen as normal, that was seen as only the smartest people or could do in the past, and maybe people couldn't even contemplate it. It was too trippy, like reading and writing, only a small period of group of people could do it. But now reading and writing is something that you've seen that it's a natural right of humanity. So let's crank it up and say that omniscience should be a natural right of humanity. But then we have to define exactly what omniscience is. And so I decided what omniscience is this. It's just memorizing. It's basically what you could do under perfect circumstances if you really bust your ass, and that's what you could obtain. So what I think is what you could obtain is memorizing the 150 things. And so that's 3 columns that goes across for 150 different things. 3 different categories: war on the top, science in the middle, culture in the bottom. And then if you can place all of those with something, that means you're omniscience with England. And then if you can do that with like all the countries in Europe, now you're omniscient with Europe. If you can do that for the whole everywhere in the world, you're omniscient for the world for the 1500 to 2000. If you can do that for all history, then you're omniscient for all of it. Obviously, you would forget stuff after you do it, but you qualified it once, and then you'll retain enough throughout your life that you'll be technically omniscient. And so I think that's a good gauge to determine what omniscience is, because and I just from serendipity and like just regular like artistic, like because it looks good. So like 3 things per decade, 3 different, because 3 is a magical number. There's like 3. The mother, father, kid, father, son, Holy Ghost. 3 wheels to a triangle, 3 wheels on a tricycle. Yeah, so sure, 3 different things. But then each thing for a decade, because there's 10 decades there's 10 years in a decade and 10 decades in a century. So then you would have 10, but then 3, so it's 30 for a century. And then for 5 of those decades, yeah, 150. So just call that omniscience. And you can place those. And then you could, if you wanted to make it like more omniscient, you could say, okay, so pass all of those for all the countries, and then in Europe or whatever, and then be able to use a random number generator to tell you whatever decade from 0 to 2000, or even you could start with 0 to, in the 500-year periods like you do it with this test. And if you can answer all of those, then you're omniscient. And then you have it. And so that heals all the problems in the world, because now we're not just yapping at each other with people saying something that's totally crazy that has nothing to do with history. And then the other guy doesn't agree with it, but they don't know history enough to be able to point out how what the other guy is saying is perfectly in line with the worst people in history, and that they don't, so it's kind of like you hit the ground running. You don't have to start with this he said, she said, or the whataboutisms, or the oh no, it didn't happen like that, because you can back up history now anyway. There's no reason for anybody to, if two people are arguing, anybody to just argue on something, because you could just look it up on the computer, like, oh look, no, you're wrong, there it is, solved. And then if the person wants to keep being arrogant and keep being wrong, they'll eventually stop. And so basically what I'm saying is that with technology the way it is, there's no reason for people to not expect that that's where we're going, that we're just going to get smarter and smarter until we have the omniscience. And so if that's where we're going, then let's get there. The only reason you wouldn't believe that is because you think that the world's not going to survive, or we're going to turn into some kind of totalitarian dictatorship like North Korea, where they don't let you learn anything because it's better for the power structure to have absolute control, and the people to just go lockstep without thinking, and then somehow the people all agree on that. And but if that happens, we will make horrible decisions and destroy the planet. So yeah, basically the only way that we can actually survive is if we have a healthy society where everybody's omniscient. So let's talk about the omniscience and make that our goal. And so that's why I made this test. But it depends on the foundation of omniscience, of the concept of omniscience. And because nowadays, we're just wasting our time not learning. Kids playing video games when they could be taking my history test. People getting up and having like right-wing people just fortifying what each other are saying with stuff that makes no sense. Or right-wingers debating left-wingers, but the right-wingers just project and then they argue about stuff that's common knowledge you shouldn't argue about. And at the end of the day, you don't get anywhere. So you could start out with much more intelligent conversations if everybody had a good level of history. And imagine if everybody had like the technically omniscient level of history, where you can identify all of it. It seems like that's where all of the world's problems would come to an end, because somebody could come along and be like, yo, I have a vision of the future. And they'd be like, yeah, let's make a robot that travels around the desert and plants seeds. And then the seeds grow, and then you have another desert robot go by that plants the next level of plants. You can terraform Earth and then create rain clouds and then lakes. And, you could refill all the dried up lakes in the world. And then people would understand what you're saying, because they all have the same kind of general vision that you do. So, so I think omniscience is a concept that we should have as society, that I don't think most people have, because they're, like my mom says, so many people are in survival mode. They just go to work and they come home. And if you're talking to something about, the future and omniscience of people, like it's like you're talking about like science fiction, that has nothing to do with them. Or you're gonna challenge them to do that, but who's gonna pay for it, and why should they? And so it's a concept that I think is is ready for the mainstream. I'm gonna try to take my test today. I was just gonna do some videos describing it first and try to pass England 1500 to 2000. Then I have to build the next country and then do it. But it doesn't take that long or is that stressful. So it'll be fun to do that and then build the next one. Anyways, I'm like passing out, like literally falling asleep as I'm talking, forgetting what I'm saying. So that is the concept of omniscience that I think we all need to have. It's one of the core basic building blocks to tether us to why we're all here in the first place. Okay, talk to you later.